Right, so finally, the absolute boy that is Jeremy Corbyn has put not just Islington North, but the entire nation out of its misery at last by officially announcing today that he is going to stand as an independent candidate to defend his seat. Corbyn has been the MP for Islington North since 1983. He's not the retirement type. He's consistently delivered locally as an excellent constituency MP and enjoys a level of popularity there as a politician that seems a completely alien concept to many of us who have MPs who are utterly self-serving and completely useless. Little wonder, therefore, that he has consistently enjoyed massive majorities won for the Labour Party, a party that no longer wants him after 40 years on purely factional terms, and equally no longer wants anyone like him either, choosing to impose their candidate for Islington North upon the local Labour Party, yet still expecting those members to campaign for that candidate. They neither know or want necessarily. Therefore, it should come as little surprise that a Corbyn win is predicted. Another seat Starmer is throwing away, therefore, for no other reason than a personal vendetta against the left. The very people he pretended to be like to get where he is today, for the sake of the Red Tories he really belongs to, retaining control of the party. Is that really more important to them than winning power? Because the treatment of Corbyn would certainly imply that. Right, so it is official. As of this morning, Jeremy Corbyn, he's released a video announcing his intention to stand as an independent candidate for Islington North, having up until this point remained a Labour Party member, just arbitrarily excluded from the parliamentary party, forbidden from sitting as a Labour MP. It was childish nonsense all on Keir Starmer because Corbyn was cleared of any alleged wrongdoing by the Labour National Executive Committee for his comments relating to the findings of the EHRC investigation into Labour over anti-Semitism allegations. He was cleared of it all because they were always nonsense. It was always a scam, and if the right-wing panel had found otherwise, given the EHRC themselves defended Corbyn's right to be critical of their report, it would likely, I imagine, have landed the party in court. None of this was good enough for Starmer, though. The man he once referred to as his friend, dishonestly, obviously, almost immediately had the whip withdrawn again by Starmer in an abuse of his executive powers, and so it has remained the case ever since. Still, remaining a Labour member, however, he could choose to put himself forward to stand as the Labour candidate once more, something else Starmer took action to then avoid by bringing a motion to the Labour Party NEC and seconded by Birmingham Ladywood Labour MP Shabana Mahmood, also somewhat perversely given what she did. She is the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, to single out Corbyn as the only Labour member in the country who would be barred from being able to stand as an MP. They were literally making this up as they went along, and given that this passed, because of course it did, the NEC being as right-wing as it is these days, Corbyn could then not stand as an MP. His local CLP could not any longer select him. But more importantly to him, I've no doubt, but also to the local party, they were barred from picking him, and they frankly didn't want anyone else. That says a lot about the man, that those around him feel so strongly and so fondly of him, but also an awful lot about Starmer, his petulance and his control freakery, along with those around him. So it's been a bit of a will he or won't he go independent story for quite some time now. Until now, of course, obviously, because he has finally announced his intention to stand as an independent, so therefore Jeremy will have now ended his decades-long tenure as a Labour Party member, a membership he's held since he was 16 years old. The comic passing itself off as a newspaper called the Daily Express is gleefully jumped on this story, saying Corbyn has already been expelled for his announcement. If true, Labour acted within the hour to do so in that case. Couldn't move fast enough, it seemed. But I would still wait for that to be confirmed elsewhere before I believed it, which hasn't happened at time of writing. However, given his treatment for so long now, I could well believe Corbyn didn't bother to resign before declaring. What difference would it actually make to him? To Starmer and his supporters, though, this might seem like a day to celebrate being finally rid of him, when Starmer never had the guts to expel him fully. But it will now become one of the focal points of the election. If Starmer loses this seat to Corbyn, it is going to be a massive embarrassment to Labour and will no doubt overshadow any victories he gets elsewhere, especially if it's a picture we see replicated in other seats. For example, Labour's loss in Rochdale to George Galloway in a by-election, when all of the party focus was able to be turned on that one seat. Yet now, they won't be able to do that, as all seats are up for grabs, and that will make more seats, if anything, more vulnerable, as more people are turned off by Starmer's betrayals, his dishonesty, his Tory lightism, his binning of everything he stood for, the litany of lies to his names that are all now getting exposed and are going to dominate this campaign and put to him in no uncertain terms. Rishi Sunak isn't asking for weekly TV debates with Starmer without reason. There is so much ammunition now to throw at him, already a poor public performer as he is, that he's going to struggle. Not that Sunak won't equally get the same back in turn. Of course, the difference this time for Corbyn is that he won't have that party support behind him anymore. And the huge majority he has built up for Labour means on paper Islington North is one of the safest Labour seats in the country. How much of that is down to him, the man, and how much on brand recognition will be the test? But having been the MP for 40 years there, he's a familiar face. He has relationships with a lot of people across the constituency and with multiple organisations. You would be hard-pressed, and goodness knows the media have tried looking, to find people with a bad word to say about him in that constituency. And that is borne out by the expected response from local Labour members too. They are absolutely incensed they've been stopped from choosing their own candidate. In fact, all remaining Labour vacancies across the country are going to be imposed candidates by the Labour National Executive now, and many will choose to campaign for Corbyn regardless in Islington North, facing expulsion if they don't resign over the matter first. Yet the expectation is many members will do just that. That speaks volumes for Corbyn, and those numbers will swell as people from across the country as well, as has been said for years now, will descend on Islington North to campaign for Corbyn as well. Despite having been caught somewhat on the hop like everyone else when Sunak all of a sudden called an election nobody was expecting him to do, lots to do in a small amount of time as a result, it hasn't stopped polling predictions for the seat being called in Corbyn's favour. Stats for Lefties, which might sound like an on-the-nose biased outlet on the face of it, but which is actually run by a Green like myself, has in their modelling predicted a win for Corbyn taking 40% of the vote, with Labour coming up short on 34%. It's very much a two-horse race there then, Starmer versus Corbyn in effect, and this is why this loss, if Labour do indeed lose it, will be a stark reflection on Starmer himself, who, even if he does, as is far and away the most likely scenario now, become the next Prime Minister, he will have no honeymoon period. He's already widely disliked. Labour, when people who don't get it now finally realise, too late again, what we are all saying, that Starmer's Labour are just another bunch of Tories who will do nothing to make your lives better after 14 years of Tory misrule already, their popularity will plummet very fast, especially if more notice gets taken of what other smaller parties are saying. The Greens, for example, but independents like Corbyn, should he get elected too, offering alternatives to more of the same misery, which both main parties will then be seeing as offering no alternative to. Also working in Corbyn's favour is, as I mentioned before, the imposition of a candidate by Labour upon Islington North, though they have boxed clever insofar as their chosen candidate, a long surmised Starmer favourite, so very much aren't Corbyn by any stretch. And for as much as they haven't parachuted in someone from elsewhere, the chosen candidate is nonetheless carrying some baggage into this too, which will be rapidly exposed in the eyes of voters. Labour's choice is a guy called Praful Nargand, who I've discussed in previous videos, who is the millionaire head of a chain of private health clinics specialising in IVF treatment, as well as a local Islington councillor. And with Starmer set on continuing the privatisation of the NHS, the optics of this choice, which may, given the nature of his business, have had IVF treatment outsourced to it potentially by the NHS, and people will certainly want to know if he is standing not for the NHS but more privatisation of it, and indeed whether he's been a beneficiary of that. That would be an absolute gift to the Corbyn campaign. I'm not convinced Nargand has got what it takes to take Corbyn on anyway, but he must have some ego. Well, they've got some brass neck to think they can stand against Corbyn, and they deserve the drubbing I sincerely hope they will get in the end of this. Corbyn is standing again to continue to fight for all the social justice issues that drew so many of us to him when he took over the Labour Party. He's always been the genuine article, and seeing how quickly Starmer betrayed everyone who backed him on false pretences when he ran to be Corbyn's successor, and how swiftly they have destroyed what Corbyn tried to return Labour to, a party for the many and not the few, shows how much that party is distancing itself from the change this country needs now. As much as it must have been a wrench for Jeremy to have finally cut himself loose from Labour, he did it because that's how far gone Labour is now. That a guy like him, well respected, experienced, with a desire to change things and not be part of the establishment order, who stands with us and not with them, can no longer be tolerated in that party. Never before has Labour been a bigger obstacle to change than it is today under Keir Starmer. And Jeremy Corbyn, however he does in this election, will be a campaign-long symbol of Labour's fall into a gang of establishment yes-men and shills for vested interests. And should he retain his seat, as I'm sure he will, with the support I'm certain he will have, even if Starmer becomes PM, Corbyn will still be there, standing as a symbol still of what Labour once was and what this country still needs, a party of the ordinary working class, and that Labour is absolutely no longer it. People in this election defending their seats, defending their parties, will be judged on their records. Keir Starmer certainly will be. Already his litany of lies over the last 4 years, his deceit and dishonesty is rapidly going to become the Tory attack lines. And the worst of it all is they'll be right about what they say about him as well. With Corbyn they had to attack and smear the man because they couldn't challenge the policies. Starmer's policies changed with the wind, a Tony Blair weather vane and not a signpost. In Islington North, it's going to be a contest between a Labour weather vane versus Corbyn the signpost. But check out the track record of lies that weather vane, whoever it is, will have to defend, courtesy of his leader, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.